Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Tiger Club Zoom call. It is Tuesday, January 26th. We have a very special guest today, a guy familiar to everybody, former Mizzou All-American, Hall of Famer, Jon Sundvold. Jon, welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Chicken and Pickle in North Kansas City, the sports scene in downtown Lee Summit, Tiger Board out of Columbia, Stables Grill in Kearney, and Conrad's Restaurant and Ale House in Liberty. Don't forget, folks, to go to the KC Tiger Club website. Please register and join our club. We don't have any other sources of fundraising this year, so it's been a challenge. We could use your support and spread the good word about these Zoom calls. Jon, welcome. Good to have you here. It was a good weekend in sports for us Mizzou fans in Kansas City.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. Fitz, good to be here. Mark, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll call you nickname. I'm sure they know you by Fitz. Yeah, great weekend. And obviously Missouri, how great was our basketball team on Saturday night was from start to finish when you go on the road and beat a team like Tennessee. It was interesting. I did the first game, the Tennessee game at Mizzou Arena, and Tennessee looked like a world beater. But, it's interesting. College sports, when you get into a little bit of a funk, and I think Tennessee's in that funk. The game before they played Missouri, they get beat by 30 to a Florida team who doesn't even have their two best players playing. So there's a little funk. I thought maybe that would hold over for a half for Tennessee, but Missouri was so good that it continued. But, when I talk about a funk, Missouri in the second half of Mississippi State game, which might have been, I don't know if I've ever seen a game where a team was so good the first half like Missouri was and be up 14.5 and lose by 15. But what happens with kids, I say kids, they're 20 and 21-year-old student athletes. When things don't somehow go right, there becomes a funk. And rarely does it end at the end of a game or a practice because there's a carryover psychologically. And those of us who played, you know what I'm talking about. And so when Missouri then played at A&M, you wonder how long. Well, the first half wasn't very good then either. But what you have to have somebody break you out of it somehow. And I thought Javon Pickett in the A&M game, the end of the first half A&M, also all of a sudden Pickett's good. There was momentum at halftime. And then that second half, Missouri outgrinded a grind-em-up team. I mean, A&M makes it ugly, and Missouri outdid to A&M what A&M wants to do to you as a team. So now all of a sudden, I'm thinking, okay, A&M, you get through the A&M game, and they played South Carolina, and from start to finish, dominated that game, and they go to Tennessee on a high. And you know what? It was a fabulous weekend. I think they're ranked 12th. I saw 10th in one poll, but 12th. And, they've got a chance. They've got a veteran team, and they're fun to watch.
Joe Lunardi's new bracketology this morning has the Tigers a third seed.
Wow.
But interesting, in KenPom, they're ranked 32, and in the ESPN BPI index, they're 37th. So I don't know if they're the 12th best team in the nation, but I think they're better than the 37th.
Well, Fitz, I'd say this. I've thought all year long, and I thought this from the end of last season, that this could be a special year. Going into last year, Conzo Martin thought this group could win the league last year. Now, they were 500. Conzo would tell every broadcaster, we got a chance to win the league last year. And all of us kind of thought, I'm not sure. But the way Xavier Pinson finished last season, and then you get all those guys back, COVID hits, many of these teams in the SEC are young, new players. A lot of these teams had guys go to the pros. There was no summer workouts together as a team, so that really hurts. Workouts were few and far between in the fall. Some hit worse with COVID. I did Vanderbilt the other day, talked to Jerry Stackhouse, the coach. They've had 2 practices, only 2 in 2 weeks because of COVID. And they've got 8 new faces. So there are a lot of teams in the SEC that have a lot of new faces. And when you take a young kid, first year in college, you're trying to figure out school in the first place. You're trying to figure out practice. You're trying to figure out your coach, your teammates. It's pretty difficult. So here sits Missouri with 90% of their scoring back and rebounding back, experienced, and guys that weren't happy that they were 500 in the league last year. So I had them picked in the top 3 in my poll at the start of the year. And I thought they've got a chance to really be good. And they, after watching them Saturday, if they continue that way, they are a top 10 team. They're as good as anybody. Outside of playing Alabama, who Alabama's playing great. And they could be, I mean, they've got a chance to win every one of these games and could win the league. I mean, Alabama's on a roll, but they've got a tough schedule. Missouri's got a tough game tonight, but realistically, they could win every one of these games.
Talking with former Mizzou All-American Jon Sundvold, also now an SEC analyst, in my humble opinion, the best college basketball analyst in the country. Jon, you're so good. I have a nephew who's a huge KU fan, a KU grad. He even thinks you're great. So,
well, I guess that's probably saying something right there.
Yeah. Tigers, tough game tonight. I think Auburn. This is not the Auburn team at the beginning of the season for very obvious. Sharif Cooper is now eligible. He's played the last 5 games. You look at their statistics when ESPN puts up leading score, Alan Flanagan, but Sharif Cooper averaging in 5 games, 22.5 points, 8 assists. He had a double in the first half against South Carolina. He's big time, probably a one and done too, I think.
Yeah, so it was funny. I watched his first game, and I'd heard about the kid. I don't watch a lot of college or high school basketball. So I watched his first game. He's different than everybody. Like, he's different. He sees plays 2 passes ahead. Like his mind is ahead of everybody. And so after the first game I watched, then I watched the second game. And I think I was on a Saturday game, and Dave Neal, I work with Dave on Saturdays and Tom Hart on Tuesday nights. And I'm off tonight. But anyway, I think Dave Neal said, we're through however many games. Who's your player of the year in the SEC? And I said, Sharif Cooper. And he laughed, and he thought, well, that's not right. He's only played twice. I said, yeah, but watch how he plays. If he plays the rest of the way, I'm not saying he'll be player of the year because he didn't play the whole year, but he just plays the game differently. I mean, it is, for all of you on here that are old Big 12 fans, he is a lot like TJ Ford was at Texas. When I was doing the Big 12, TJ Ford, when he was at Texas, he dominated the game without having to make jump shots from everywhere. Took them to the Final Four, the Longhorns, when Rick Barnes was there. But Sharif's the same way. Now, what could be a tough matchup for him? Maybe a team like Missouri. Pinson's pretty quick. And then we've kind of got the big guard you, as Cons would like to say. Drew Smith, Mark Smith. Pinson, when he comes in, I think they can maybe push and shove him around a little bit. But the kid is special. He's something that I haven't seen for a long time, that just makes plays, makes them better. So Auburn is this team that goes, Bruce Pearl is a coach that loves to give his point guard the basketball and then let that guy run the whole show. And he's done it for years. And so they've gotten good because Cooper's good, but Flanagan's a shooter. They've got guys, JT Thor's a freshman, tall kid that will shoot the ball from outside. They're not very big inside. And the difference this year of any year, just because of COVID, is there are no home crowds. So whereas we used to go to Auburn, it used to be the loudest place in the league because it's a smaller venue they built, a beautiful new building, let's say 5 years old. And the student section, the jungle, is so loud that the opposing teams, I mean, you get run out of the gym early. Well, that hadn't happened this year. There's no big crowds. And I took a look before I came on. We are at 27 wins for the home team, 23 wins for the road team. So we're nearly 50-50, which is unheard of in college basketball. And that's in this league. But whether you go to Lexington, Kentucky, right, there's not many people there. No matter where you go, there's just no home court advantage. There's no momentum swings. So it really favors a road team. If you're going to have any year, you're going to win some road games. I was talking to someone on the coaching staff for Mizzou before they went to Bud Walton. And one of the things they said was they've not played well at Bud Walton in Arkansas. And again, not as much noise, not a big crowd. And Mizzou from the tip was solid. And it's a big deal. And Bruce Pearl's always relied on his teams. They play a fast pace, not always very physical. They don't defend really well unless you turn it over. But he relies on that quickness and the momentum of a home crowd. Now, they haven't needed it with Sharif Cooper. They went on the road to South Carolina and dominated the Gamecocks. So I would expect them to play well. You mentioned the Flanagan kid. They got a kid named Cambridge, who's solid, not as consistent. Jalen Williams. They'll be ready because it's a game. Now you've got a 12th ranked team, Missouri, coming in, and Auburn's got a chance to make their mark. And Bruce Pearl is about what would he call it? Making history. That's what he always talks about, making history. So if he can beat a 12th ranked team, then that's another one to his list that he'd like to knock off.
Well, and they have a self-imposed penalty from they're not going to play in the NCAA tournament this year, so regular season is extra important to them.
Right.
Drew Smith is the reigning SEC Player of the Week. Do you think he will get Cooper as his assignment? If so, Drew has been susceptible to foul trouble.
Yeah, I don't know how they'll do it. They could put Drew on him. Drew's had a fabulous season. He's a great player, both sides of the basketball. Defensively, anytime. What I've noticed over the years, and I've played with guys in the NBA that were on a steal list leader. If you're up the top of the league in steals, you become more trying to stay on the top of that list. And so when I watch Drew play, there's times he's taken chances, which then may be a reach here and a reach there. He's not done it as much the last couple of games because I'm sure the coaching staff said, hey, we want you on the floor. We don't need you on the bench with 2 fouls or 3 fouls. So it would be interesting if he's against Cooper. Again, Cooper's not a shooter. He'll make a shot or two, but he puts it on the floor and he can draw contact. I would think it's probably Pinson to start off with, and they'll probably do a few different things. Arkansas double-teamed Sharif Cooper 60 feet away from the bucket. He had, I think he had 11 assists the first half against Arkansas. And so what they did the second half, they double-teamed him before the half-court line. And so then he would pass the ball up, and then they would just try not to let him have the ball back. So you may see some things, but Ncaa will start straight up because I think Ncaa's he feels his team can guard anybody straight up, and just see if they can contain him that way and make other guys beat him. But Auburn's got some guys that can really, really play and really shoot it.
And Arkansas came back and won that game.
Right.
I think is Auburn's only lost in the last 4, I believe, if I'm correct. So,
yeah.
Let's talk about Jeremiah Tillman. He had quite a streak of games, points, and rebounds. Not his big Saturday, but I still think he was the key. They were double teaming him, and Pinson and Drew Smith both took advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it's great what you notice is the fact that because he played well last week especially, you have a couple games where you're more powerful inside. Now all of a sudden the defense, any scouting report's going to say we can't let Tillman dominate us. Well, if you double team Jeremiah, he's just matured so much in the last 12 months and so much from when he was a freshman. He doesn't seem to be bothered by double teams. He's not bothered by maybe a whistle. He's not bothered by a missed dunk. He smiled. He missed 2 dunks against Tennessee. Maybe more of a smile here, a smile there. That's maturity. It's coaching. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of practice. It's a lot of going through. Probably from a coaching standpoint, I think they know who Jeremiah is as a person. They know his personality. Ncaa would always say, I don't need Jeremiah Tillman to score 30 points and get 20 rebounds. And everybody thinks because he's 6'10" or 11, he should. They need him to dominate in 3 to 5 minute stretches at different times and stay on the floor, stay out of foul trouble. And I think Jeremiah understands that. I think he knows that he can be a big factor in every game. I think it's his senior year, so you're always thinking of what's beyond this year, even though this is your focal point. But can you possibly make a living playing basketball? And the only way he can is if he has a good year. But every game that I've watched now, Missouri playing, the opponent, he's the focal point, right? They're going to double team him. And then you want to see what happens. The interesting part about Missouri, and it's odd, is how poorly they shoot 3-pointers, but how good some of their 3-point shooters are. So it's a mixture of who takes the threes. And I was talking to Frank Martin before South Carolina played Missouri, and we were talking about that. And he said, I'm okay if Mitchell Smith or Pinkett maybe takes one, or Kobe Brown, but I can't let Mark Smith make 4 or 5 of them. And sure enough, Mark Smith made, and I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 that night against South Carolina. And Mark Smith becomes a focal point for any opponent because he can do that. Now, he doesn't do it maybe as consistently as Mizzou fans would like to see him. But because of his ability, you take his number at 40% threes, and you take the team number at 25% or 26 or 7% threes. I think it's an odd thing when teams scout Missouri, because that 3-point number looks bad. But in reality, if the right guys are shooting it, and Drew Smith can make a couple, and Pinson can hit him when he hits them, they're a tough team to match up against. And so, okay, Konzo's been fine with Mitchell Smith taking 1 or 2 or more. Teams won't worry about that. But the idea, if you get it to the right shooters, the other part, what Missouri does well is they shoot free throws well. So if all those guys, if they can get to the free throw line more than rely on some jump shots, that's a big advantage. They've just got enough guys that can score different ways. And that's how you win when you got college kids. You don't have to rely on one guy.
Tillman, you played with, I think, the greatest big man in Mizzou history, Steve Stepanovic. And I'm always reluctant to make some comparisons, but is Tillman an NBA player?
I don't know, because I don't watch it close enough. Could he be a backup big guy in the NBA? Yes. The NBA's changed so much because all the big guys now shoot jump shots from everywhere. Yeah. If you watch the NBA, guys are great shooters, or they're the best in the world, but even the centers, most of them are pretty mobile and they shoot jump shots. There's always room for guys, though, that can defend and rebound and are powerful. Now, whether he's a first-round pick or a chance that maybe late first round, second round, maybe some team needs a guy that gives them 15 minutes off the bench. I can't see him as a starter, but again, I don't know every NBA team. I think he'll have a chance. And the more and the better he plays this season, I think what the scouts will look at is how he plays, how he handles himself, how he defends, can he score around the rim. A lot of kids today worry about, well, I need to show people I can make 3-pointers. No, you really just have to show them what you do and do it well. Stay away from the things you don't do well. And then when you get to a training camp, just do what you do well. And that's why they scout you, and that's why you make a team. They don't need everybody to do everything. They've only got a handful of those guys anyway. So he'll have a chance, Fitz. I think he'll have a chance. And I'd love him to, if he keeps playing well, it'll really benefit him.
We're talking to Jon Sundvold, former Mizzou All-American, SEC analyst. If you'd like to ask a question, please go to the chat feature and we'll fire these questions at him at the end of our discussion. Jon, around the SEC, I saw a comment from Rick Barnes this morning that he said everybody thinks the SEC is down because Kentucky's struggling and Tennessee's lost back-to-back games. Nobody says the ACC is struggling when Duke and North Carolina aren't very good. Alabama, to me, I mean, they're a top 10 team right now. They've won 8 in a row in the conference. Average margin of victory, I think, is 17 points. Did you see this coming from them?
I did not, from Alabama. Nate Oates, they've turned that whole team over almost. I mean, in 1 year, there's so many new faces outside of some veteran guys. I mean, John Petty has been there. This is his senior year, and he's playing great. Herbert Jones is potentially could be player of the year. It's hard to pick one player that separates from any of these teams. It's like Missouri, which is the best guy? It's hard to say. Obviously, Drew Smith's great and Pinson's been fabulous. And Alabama's the same way. They play at a different pace. They shoot a lot of threes. They don't shoot any mid-range shots. They either take it to the rim or shoot threes, but they're better defensively. And I did not probably see it coming. I probably had them picked 5th or 6th in the league. And you go back to Rick Barnes' comment. I'm not sure I quite agree with the Duke North Carolina assessment, because if your big name team isn't good, then the assumption is around the country. And again, so if Kentucky's not good, then you would assume, well, the SEC's down. There's probably some truth to that, because we think the same if Kansas is down, or really if Duke is down. I mean, there's some big names that if they're down, you always think, well, maybe that league's not as good. there's been a turnover in the SEC. Last year, we had a lot of kids go to the NBA. And so when you were trying to look at these teams coming in this year, that's why I thought Missouri would have such a good chance. There's a lot of good young talents that some of these teams are really going to be good next year, especially if some of the freshmen stay around and have a full summer to work out with their squads. Again, COVID's just been a different animal. But the SEC, now you talk about, I've thought Tennessee was a top 10 team all year. They're in a major funk right now. If they snap out of it, I still think they're a top 10. I think Missouri's there. I think Alabama's there. So now you're looking at the rest of college basketball and thinking, okay, are the other leagues down? And I watched the Big 12 a little bit. Obviously, Kansas is not as good. But Baylor has put themselves up there close to Gonzaga to say those two, and then who are the rest? Well, if Alabama and Missouri and Tennessee can be right below that from 2 through 10, that's pretty good for the SEC. And then there's a lot of teams you don't really want to play from the SEC when we get to the tournament, Florida being one of them. Florida's won the last couple of games. Keontae Johnson, who went out in December, we're not sure if he'll play again this year, but he could. And then they have won without two of their best players. And so they're now winning. And so you wouldn't want to draw them. We know that Arkansas can score 85 or 90 points. You really don't want to draw them. I still have this wild idea that South Carolina is better than they've played in the last week. They have played before Missouri. They'd only played 6 games. I mean, they've just not practiced and not played, but maybe if they have a 2-month period here, 6 weeks of practice and games, I think South Carolina can be good. What we don't know is what's going to happen to any of these tournaments. I'm sure there'll be a Big 12 tournament. I'm sure there'll be an SEC tournament. I just don't know how they'll do them. Meaning, do all teams have to come to the tournament? Let's say you're a lock to be in the NCAA tournament. Let's say you're Missouri and you win the league or you're second place. Do you need to go to Nashville to play, or do they change it and say, okay, these 4 teams are probably going to be in. Let's take 10 teams to Nashville and see who can get a couple more wins or who can win. The tournament champ goes automatically to the NCAA. So there'll be tournaments, but I just don't know if all teams need to be there or how they'll do it. But we'll know that in a few weeks.
How do you see the makeup or the canceled games being made up? Missouri has 2. South Carolina has more than 2. Will they put I guess there's one weekend this season where they'll have a chance to make those up. What are you hearing on that scheduling? So
the only thing I've heard is the Saturday, March 6th, I believe it is. There are no games. So let's go back 5th, 4th, 3rd. 2nd and 3rd would be Tuesday to Wednesday. There are games Tuesday and Wednesday. So now you've got a full week until the tournament. And can you play? I don't know. Can you play 2 games? Can you play a game? South Carolina can't make up all their games that they've missed. But can you, again, who are the games against? Where are they located? If you played Tuesday night on the 2nd, could you play the 4th and 6th if you had 2 games? I've not heard how it's going to be answered. I know there'll be games on that Friday, Saturday, but I don't know if you can get 2 games in there before. You could actually probably play, if you played a game on the Wednesday, the 3rd, you could play the 6th, possibly. You could play maybe the Friday and Monday before Nashville. I'm not sure. But I think it'll depend on which teams are playing. How close are you? What time can we play? And all those things. Or they might get to the end and say, we don't need to play. Let's focus on what we can do for the tournament. Because really that's the key, again, to get more teams in the NCAA tournament.
You have been doing games for the most part from home this season. How difficult is that?
It's been fun. I say that because when I'm done, I walk upstairs and I'm home. I didn't know. Every year it's will I do games or not? Because the travel for me, so to do a Tuesday night game, I travel on Monday out of Columbia. And again, we have an airport here and it's good. I fly through Dallas and I connect. So I leave on Monday, do a game Tuesday night, catch that early 6 a.m. flight out of wherever through Dallas and get home, Flight lands at 2 o'clock in Columbia. So this year, I didn't know what COVID was, and ESPN called, hey, we'd love you to do games. We don't know. Normally, I sign for 25 games, and that seems to be a good number. I might go over it if I do the tournament. So the guy called and said, we don't even know if we're having a season, but how about this? How about 19? I said, well, it's an odd number, but sure, 19. And he said, we're not sure how we're doing it. And this was all the way back 1st of October. So they said, we're not sure how we're doing games. So then finally in the mail, I got this big box, and it was all this computer stuff. And I called a guy at ESPN, here's directions, plug A to plug B, find a room. Here's a tripod for the camera. First camera was an iPad. And so you hook all that up. You're on a Zoom broadcast with, trying to make sure everything works. They sent a monitor. So basically I have a MacBook Pro that they sent. That's hooked then to a bigger monitor that I can see. So our broadcasts are a Zoom broadcast. So on my screen in front of me could only be the game, but I put the game on the monitor to the left of me so I can see it better. In my box in front of me, there's 4 other cameras at a game that I can watch. But I found out early, I don't see much there anyway. It's too hard to see and follow. So the Zoom box will have my producer, who is a local person. And let's go back a step. So a number of years ago, the SEC told the schools in the SEC, you need to build out a control room. And it costs about $5 million. And some of the SEC schools went, I don't want to do that. And the SEC said, we send you 40 to 42 million. You're going to build it out. We're going to have a control room. And the reason was that because the SEC network decided we're going to televise all these games and all these things. The only way we can do it from an expense point, we don't want to send in a TV truck. We need to have a control room. Now, it could be located in the football stadium. It could be located in the basketball arena. Could be located at a different site. For instance, Alabama, theirs is located in the football stadium. So over the last few years, if I was doing a game on the SEC network, sometimes we'd have a TV truck. And when we have a TV truck, us broadcasters can do more stuff. We can draw on things, we can video, we've got all kinds of gadgets. The control rooms are run by the university. So you have someone that works for the university. A lot of students are learning stuff in there. Then you've got cameramen. So if I were to go do a game at Alabama in the past, the control room was at the football stadium. So I would see the producer and the director in the morning. And if our game was at 7:30, they would text me to make sure I was in the arena at 6 o'clock or 6:30. They were 6-7 blocks away. So there was it's different feel than when you have a TV truck, the producer and director, you come out, you talk to each other, they go back in, you want to make sure you're on the same page. So anyway, let's fast forward. So all these schools have a control room. Auburn's is about 5 blocks away in a separate total building. Mizzou's is in Mizzou Arena. So I actually when we were doing home games, you could see the producer and director and everybody else. So everyone is set up differently. When COVID hit, the SEC was all set for this. So when I hook my stuff up, what happens, as I told you, I have a MacBook Pro. After talking with Bristol, Connecticut and getting set up where my camera is, at first it was an iPad. Then they sent out this little camera that was better, or I guess made us look better. Maybe the coloring was better. I have to turn on my little spotlight. What we do then, 6 hours before the game, I open my MacBook Pro up, hit a button, plug in the microphone stuff. We have this box. And there's someone in Bristol, Connecticut that is in charge of making sure my stuff works. But I leave 6 hours. I just have to, if it's a 12 o'clock game, 6 a.m. morning, I lift the stuff up and I leave. 3 hours before the game, so let's say at 9 a.m. on a 12 tip on a Saturday, I then come on, we all put our headsets on. Our broadcast is a Zoom broadcast. So as I'm looking at you all today, this would be my producer in one box. If I'm working with Tom Hart's in another box, statistician. If we work with Tom, his statistician's from Atlanta. Another gentleman that I work with a lot's from Birmingham. I've done some where the stat guy's in Idaho. But his picture will be there. I will usually make the play-by-play bigger in my screen because we'll do hand signals together. Now we can talk to each other on our headset with a separate button. So if I want to talk to Tom Hart, there's a separate button that goes into his right ear or whatever he's set up that I can say, hey, let's go to this if we're coming back from commercial or whatever it is. I can also do that with the stat guy. Can you show me what's Tillman? How many in a row is that for Tillman? But for the most part, the stat guy will hold up a sign and might write a number. If Tillman makes another bucket, he might write down 20, so I know it's his 20th point. I also have another computer next to me, which is my personal computer, that would have all the stats. So there's a live statbroadcast.com is a live stat feed. So there's a lot of things going around me that at a game, I wouldn't look at any of this stuff. I've only done one game on the road, and that's Kentucky. And the reason is Kentucky, if you've been to Rupp Arena, their arena's downtown. Their control room is way over on campus at a football stadium, and I don't think they've run the proper wiring to make all that work. So if you do a Kentucky game, for the most part, I think you're going there. When I did the home game of Kentucky, we weren't on the floor, we were up. I enjoyed it because I didn't look at my monitor at all. I watched the game like I would normally do, and I'm looking for things. So now I'm looking at the same broadcast you're looking at. And I'm trying to find, in my world, I'm trying to find things that aren't just obvious, but I'm only seeing the obvious because that's where it is. Where we've had to make adjustments with the producers on the games. These are all home producers, meaning it's their team. They'll have a, let's say, well, I noticed it in the Mississippi State game. In the second half when Missouri was at Mississippi State, the two kids were playing well. Stewart and Molinar were playing really well. So Stewart would make another shot, and the camera guy followed Stewart down the floor. And Missouri laid it in for two. And I knew that Dave Neal in Atlanta and Damian Fishback in Birmingham didn't know who scored, right? They're watching what you're watching. They're watching, J.D. Stewart jog back. And so what you always have to remind your producer is never leave the ball. We can't zone in on if I was telling a story, if I was in person and telling a story about Coach Hollander at Mizzou, I might tell the director, I'm going to tell a story about Coach Hollander, show him on camera, right? We can't leave the ball. We can't because we don't see it. We in the play-by-play guys guessing, Missouri just scored 2 points. I have no clue who scored it. So it's been interesting. My enjoyable part is, again, I walk upstairs, I'm home, and I haven't traveled. But, it's not as good as it could be. But I'll be honest, Fitz, when I did games in November and December, they never had us on TV because they hadn't perfected the camera yet because there's a delay. When we come on TV, that camera that we have is not from the computer. They have a separate camera. They have to switch a switch. They switch wherever it is, they switch. That camera that picks us up, there's a delay to us. Our words are the same as a camera, and most of us had to upgrade some of our wired stuff at home. Our words are the same, but it's not what we're hearing. It's not what's on the screen next to me. So it's a little different. Right when we leave the camera, then they make a switch and everything's easy, and it's right on target. So it's there have been a lot of different things, but none of it's gone blank yet. I'm gonna knock on wood that one of us just loses, power, and then I'm not sure what we do. Then it'd be all on the other guy to do the best I can.
Sounds like a challenge. John, ready for some questions?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, if you want to ask John a question, go to the chat feature. A lot is made of having an experienced basketball team this year. Also notice the fact that Coach Martin is in his 4th year in the program, a longevity he has never had his other coaching stops. How much of a factor is that?
Well, huge. Let's go back. Huge for the practice standpoint. Young guys, a lot of teams haven't practiced much. Let's just be honest. Some have. So you got a veteran team, whether they practice or not, it's good because they know this team knows what Coach Martin wants. Simple as that. As a senior, when I was a senior, you knew what Norm Stewart wanted. You knew when he walked in if he was happy or mad. I mean, you know what your coach needs. Young teams, if you can't practice, you miss all that. What was the second part of that?
How much? Coach Martin's in his fourth year,
Yeah.
which is longer than as long as he's been anywhere. Is that a factor?
Well, it's a big factor. It's his fourth year somewhere. It's first time. He's been 3 years in a lot of different places. I think it's a factor for him and his staff. Probably the team. He's not rebuilding anything. And, you know, I always said when he came here, and I got to know Cuonzo when he was coaching in Tennessee and liked how he coached him the practice. I thought when he came here, because some people said, well, he'll be there 3 and done. I thought, no, this is where he gets to make his mark as a coach. 3 years at Missouri State was fine. 3 years at Tennessee was fine. I know he made the NCAA in Sweet 16. They didn't win the league, probably in the middle of the league that year. And then you get out to Cal. I would say, doing my homework, that this is the highest ranked team he's had. It's the most weeks in the ranking that he's ever been a part of. I think he had a Cal team that was preseason ranked maybe 23rd or 4th, lasted a couple weeks, and then ended the season maybe there. But I think this is a chance for Coach Martin to make his mark on how good a coach, what kind of program can he build for a long time. And I hope so. I mean, I hope he's here for a long time, I think he can wear down because he is so personally involved in players and the way things are that, I mean, I know coaches wear out during the season. It's hard. It's a hard business. And I think he spends a lot of time in it, but I hope he lasts a long time at Mizzou.
I do too. He's a great representative for the university. Good question here. John Brown was from Dixon, Ricky Frazier, Charleston, Greg Church from Palmyra. It's been a long time since Mizzou has had a player from small town Missouri. Are there Power 5 players outside the metros anymore, or do they go play in club teams in the cities?
You know, I would guess for the most part, that's a good question because sometimes you don't think of those things. I think there's always kids in different places. But, yeah, they're playing AAU. You know, you might – some of them – it's amazing how many leave and go play somewhere else. They go play in the city, but they're really not from the city, right? They leave places. But it'd be nice to find a John Brown again, or Greg Kavanagh, or Frazier, or it'd be nice to find – some of those guys that are out there, because sometimes there's going to be, but for the most, these kids play a lot of AAU. They sometimes transfer to another school, probably in a city, to get more competition. But honestly, if you're good enough, they'll find you. I mean, the coaches, they'll see you.
Last kid I can remember coming out of a small town that hit it big was Otto Porter, who ended up going to Georgia from Missouri.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. That's a good point.
Scott County, but that was 8 years ago, I think, or something.
He was Frank Hayes' first year here.
Because I think he would have come to Missouri if Mike Anderson had stayed. Is that what I'd always heard? But
yeah, I thought so too. I went and met Frank Hayes the first day he was here, and I didn't go to the press conference. I went before, and I said the problem with me going to the press conference, and this is probably not right to say, if I smile, smirk, or frown, someone's going to say he either likes the guy, doesn't like the guy. It has nothing to do with, and I went to say that to Frank Hayes. I said, hey, I'm here to help in any way. And I knew Otto Porter. My wife's from Sikeston, Missouri. And so the connection is I knew a lot of people in Southeast Missouri that could help. But Georgetown was in right when Mike Anderson had left, so that was a tough one to get. But, yeah, that you'd like, especially in our state, you'd love to have kids from any town that is really, really good to come to Mizzou.
You'll like this next question. Tell us what you remember about the 51 points you poured in when your Blue Springs Wildcats beat Ruskin.
I wish they'd had a 3-point line. No, just kidding. You know, I was fortunate. I played on a really good high school team with some really good athletes. We were only disappointed because William Chrisman beat us. We'd beaten them twice, and they beat us to go to the Final Four, which what was supposed to happen was DeSmet, led by Stepanovich, was going to play my team from Blue Springs. I didn't hold up my end of the bargain. Stepanovich got there, and they won. They beat William Chrisman in the final. But I played with – think of this. Now, this is Blue Springs back in 1979, not 2021. Smaller town. My class was the first class that had over, I think we had 400 kids in my class. So two of my brothers, I was three, I'm the youngest of 4 boys. brother Bob graduated Nebraska high school and played junior college Nebraska, and then went to South Dakota State. So two of my brothers, Scott and Stuart, when I was in junior high, were playing. Blue Springs was playing Pleasant Hill, Higginsville, Harrisonville. My freshman year, my sophomore year, when I was playing for Blue Springs, we were in the small six conference, and we went to the middle six, big six. So we were my class. But long story short, here's Blue Springs. I'm a senior. I end up being a first-round draft pick. On my team was a sophomore named Stevie Harris. Steve had moved out from Kansas City, his family, came to Blue Springs. He was playing JV basketball, and I went to the varsity coach and said, I think he could help us. So Stevie started the rest of the way. He passed away a few years ago of cancer, but he played for Nolan Richardson at Tulsa. But anyway, so he was a first-round draft pick of the Houston Rockets. So if, as odd as it sounds, there's two kids on a team that are first-round draft picks in the NBA, which is, I'd say, unheard of. Besides that, excuse me, one of my close friends, Scott Middleton, who's general manager of Adams Toyota, if you're ever out in Lee Summit, Scott Middleton was recruited at the time Southwest Missouri State to play basketball. He tore his knee up, played baseball, got drafted to play minor leagues for the Reds organization. Another kid, Shane Fairbanks, who came to Mizzou to play baseball. Shane went on and played for the Houston Astros in minor leagues. Shane's son, Peter, is with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's one of the great relievers. So that's four guys that were major league athletes. We had one guy go to Southwest Baptist to play basketball, and someone went somewhere in Kansas, Ncaa school. So there were games I had a lot of points, but I had some good guys to play with.
That's amazing. That's yours. So is the mid-range jump shot a lost art in NCAA basketball? Now, I'm going to add on to that. When Mizzou lost to Mississippi State, they killed us with mid-range jump shots. But overall, your thoughts?
Well, there's some real good at it and some not. I don't know if kids practice as much. Let's go back to Alabama. Alabama shoots three-pointers or they shoot layups. The two kids, Molinar and J.D. Stewart at Mississippi State, are fabulous in the mid-range. I watched the kid last night that won the game for West Virginia, was great at mid-range. The McClung kid's great at mid-range. It's I don't think it's a lost art. I don't know if it's AAU or high school. You get rewarded for shooting that three. But I think great scorers have to have a wide variety of shots. I would say Drew Smith's a better mid-range guy than a long-range guy. And where I think the advantages of the mid-range game, which most of us played back then, is the fact that you draw more contact. Let's say you're not great at finishing at the rim. That was never my specialty once I left high school. Pretty good at high school, but college and then pros. But my mid-range game was so good that if I could get body on body, I could draw contact and get to the free throw line. Possibility of three-point play. So the better scorers are probably good at mid-range. I just think sometimes the way coaches coach, like Alabama, it takes away maybe a skill set that a kid might have that could be on display, when he leaves school.
Why do you think the Blue Bloods, Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, and North Carolina are struggling?
My guess, this is a guess, semi-educated guess, maybe just a guess. I think with all the NCAA stuff that's been happening, my educated guess, sources, I think some of the shoe money is drying up a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean all those kids with shoe money go places, but let's just be honest. We're seeing a different set of things going on. Now, if you take Kentucky, it's the least talented team I've seen, but only because a couple of their freshmen aren't maybe as great as they were predicted to be, right? So Kentucky's freshmen this year will be really good in a year or two. Whether they're there in a year or two, I don't know that. But when you look at the scene of college basketball and the teams that are struggling, outside of maybe not having the talent they used to get, the freshmen, the young team, they've not practiced together. Again, we'll go back to what Missouri's good at. They're older guys. And it's what every team wants to have older players. Duke has younger kids because they one and done. Kentucky one and done. Kansas, if you watch Kansas, and I get to see them whenever, and they're always great, but I'm not sure which of those kids is an NBA first rounder or not. And that's usually you say, well, that kid's a lottery and that kid will be a first rounder. So some years you might miss on a recruit or might miss on something, but yeah, I think some of the tennis shoe money sometimes drying up, which could affect a lot of schools.
Your brother Bob earned his 250th career win this month. Do you ever get to catch any of his UMSL games?
Well, they won't let us in the gym. I try to catch a couple a year. And I'm a former curator. So there were times when in the winter we'd have a meeting at UMSL, the curators. And every year we were there, when I was a curator, there would be a game. So I would kind of miss the handshake stuff that the curators were doing with some people, and I'd go watch the basketball game. But this year I've watched a few of his games. They're televised. Their league televises some games. So I'll tune in and, watch Big Brother on the sideline, and he's done well. He's got a good team. I don't know if they're ranked. They were top 10 early, then lost a couple, but last year they were going to go, they won the league for the first time in, 30 or 40 years. They were going to go to the NCAA like everybody that got shut down. They could be back, and they probably have a chance to be an Elite Eight or Final Four team. He's got a talented squad, and he's a good coach. And he's got an older set of guys. He's got all the guys back from a year ago. They've had no COVID issues. So that means his kids have really been good at going to practice, going to get their work done, and really back to your room. He said it's really been hard on kids. We all think of adults, and I think of my parents at home in Blue Springs and how it would affect any of us not being around people. But think of college kids that most kids want to be around other students. But if you're a student athlete and you're in the gym and then your coach demands that you go back to your dorm, don't see anybody, don't talk to anybody. My brother said it's been hard on college kids, and he hopes, he said he's been lucky they haven't had any COVID issues, but that means he's got a veteran team that's doing all the stuff right.
We got 3 more questions. They all relate to your time on the board of curators, so a good segue. So I'm going to fire these out. First of all, thank you for serving on the board. Speak to some of your challenges and successes on that time, and also what's your assessment of the university and its future?
I think the success is Moon Choi. I was put on by Governor Nixon, and I got a call from Governor Nixon. He wanted to speak to me. So I went down to see the governor back then, and he wanted me to be a curator, and I didn't know what the curators did, to be honest. I didn't think it was my position to be a curator, but he said, you need to find a president that can transform what we're doing at Missouri. And we found Moon Choi, and it's not easy to find people. I think he's been fabulous. I think there's always challenges of higher education going forward. How does it look? How does it feel? Now you have COVID. I thought up until COVID, I thought the university was on a great thing. And now you're just trying to get through this and try to build from that. So I think that's one of the great successes. There are a lot of things that are done. A lot of people give up time. And I think all 4 campuses have great leadership at each campus. The curator, the group that just got done, Julia Bernsick was the chair. When they made Moon Choi the chancellor of this campus and president, I thought it was a great move. I know some disagree with it, but I think in the times we're in, and I think if you know Moon Choi, he's a workaholic, energizer bunny. I think he can handle it, and I think he gives the freedom to the other chancellors on the other campuses to make their schools better.
And last question we have that, what can you or will you tell us that we don't know from media reports about the hiring of Coach Drinkwitz?
I think they did a good job hiring him. The athletic director had names that he threw out there, and when they got back from Charlotte, was it Charlotte? Then I think it was Charlotte. They went to visit with Coach Drinkwitz. So that's, I think they did a good job. And I think, he had a fabulous year to have an all SEC schedule. So I was pleased how it turned out, and, let's wish him the best. It's not an easy league to be the football coach in.
Well, I think he got a big hire this week. Steve Wilkes defense going out big time. So John, thank you. I feel like we could talk to you for a while. I was wanted to remind you, you probably know this, but of course you played on probably the greatest 4-year run in Mizzou history with 4 Big 8 champions. But your freshman year, that team set the record for NCAA field goal percentage. I don't know if you remembered that.
Oh, yeah, I do.
57.2 for the season. I think that's like Joe DiMaggio's hitting streak. I think that's a record that'll never be broken.
Well, it won't be broken because you now have the 3-point line.
Right.
And my claim to fame there, Fitz, is of the starters, I was at 45%. So that meant the other guys were way up there.
You were shooting out a little farther.
Yeah, I contributed a few buckets there my freshman year from deep, but yeah, 57. I mean, it's unheard of, and that record will never be broken. It's the other record. You know, the team last year made 54 free throws in a row,
right?
Which is an NCAA record. So
and they lost the game that they made.
Yeah. So you know, there's 2 records. Both of them. 54 free throws in a row is unheard of, and what they did last year and the number of guys that made them.
I know.
Was shocking, but it wasn't just 2 guys. It was everybody. So, you know, let's hope they get on that roll and streak. And if they play well tonight, and I think they're a confident bunch, and I think Gonzo loves his squad. So let's hope as Tiger fans we're in for a good ride.
My claim to fame is I kept the stats that year for the basketball team, if you remember.
So you're saying you could have boosted me up a few percent?
I could have, yeah. Although, you know, I hope nobody ever accused me of fudging to get to that 57. John, thanks. I think we could talk to you all day. Really appreciate your time. You're not on a game tonight. I guess Saturday's your next assignment, right?
I'll be on a game Saturday live from my basement, so I'll be a happy camper.
All right, make sure you shave before the game.
Well, yeah, I might. You know, throw on something. I'll be okay.
All right. Jon Sundvold, former Mizzou All-American. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, next week we'll have another former Mizzou letterman, Jarrett Sutton, who played a little more recently, and he's now a scout for the New Orleans Pelicans. So I'm sure he'll have a lot of insights on the Tigers and some NBA stuff. Maybe getting that NBA team to Kansas City. If John can write a check for $4 billion, I think that's the price. So, all right. Hey, great to see you all today. Don't forget to go to our website, kctigerclub.com. and renew your membership, and also spread the word about these Zoom calls. You can watch it again on YouTube tomorrow. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday.
See you all.